we're gonna give Ox a call. Hey Ox,
Hello.
how you doing?
I'm doing well.
Wonderful. Today you're being depicted in a cozy treehouse with rain in the background. Not sure how well that reflects your real life situation.
It's it wouldn't be new to me here. It's raining all the time.
Yeah. I mean, same here, dude. Like Seattle, UK, all that type of area. Pretty rainy. Yep. Cool, man. Thanks so much for taking the time today. Really appreciate you jumping on the call and like you already do so much for this community. You know, you've uh, had a meteoric rise through the working side of Among Us, and especially on the purple server. So yeah, I mean, just the extra time is much appreciated.
No worries at all. I've a lot of time for this type of stuff, and it's good to have these conversations going on all the time with the players to kind of understand what we need to do from our side to improve at the same time. So this is a good platform to do that through as well.
Absolutely, and I mean, in terms of improvement, I've seen you make a lot of changes recently, based on feedback, suggestions, and it's just
Mhm.
like anything, you know. As soon as you give it an inch, they'll want to take a mile. So
Yeah,
like,
but
the appetite for changes seems to be really high, and people are giving a lot of feedback, and you're approaching it really constructively. So
mhm.
yeah, maybe you can shed some light on how some of that's played out.
So some of the stuff that gets put into feedback at times, we try to look at it all and usually I'm the main person whenever it comes to the feedback. That's kind of my area.
Hmm.
And I have the rest of the rank senior mods will focus a wee bit more heavily on the behind the scenes stuff with the moderators, the scrutiny with the moderators, and I'll be the last ditch to come in and step in at that point. Um, Really, with the feedback, what we're trying to do is make a big change because we are constantly looking at the statistics of the games, and we're noticing right now that the imposters are very much so struggling. They're struggling with the tide of the rules and the way that the game's playing in the current meta
Hmm.
that we're experiencing in the server. It falls very harshly around claiming scan, which has been noticeable, and also the queuing and the inability of imps to be able to fake scan at all.
Yep.
I think a lot of people this time are looking. Originally, past seasons, it was pre-planning that they looked upon that needed to be changed, but we made a big change to pre-planning to put it on 4 because we felt that the extra meeting would also put the crew at a disparity. And if the crew aren't able to play it correctly, then it makes the single double much more easier on a real level, which gives the imps more of an option to win, even if they get put into the light gauge
Hmm.
without that extra button. So, because you could kill anywhere, right?
Yep.
And they could see it on vitals and then they could call a button. But if they're in the position where the button has been called to make that pre-plan originally, and the other crewmate could have used it at an earlier point in the game, all it really results on is one little mistake to be made, which is usually what we rely on whenever it comes to imposter wins so far within the server, making good kills and having crew making mistakes on the back end of your kills.
So it sounds like you want to try to give imps a little bit more counterplay opportunity. What do you think has been the most helpful rule change so far?
Um, I think the the one that's helped the imps, I think the most was a kind of the way that we have tried to work with the stacking rule. And we've also a big thing that helped imps was the DC rule because
Mm-hmm.
a big thing that was happening within the community and what we noticed was a lot of players would just leave whenever they die. They would die, leave the game, and then that's them done.
Mm-hmm.
Um, this caused then for crew ghosts not to have to do any tasks, and at times they would just leave mid meeting, and the game would just end mid meeting, and the imps didn't stand a chance. Uh, which seemed very unfair. So we kind of put a very tight hold onto the way that we deal with that and the way we approach the DC rule now. So crew aren't allowed to leave the game whatsoever unless they have an emergency to go to. That's kind of where the leniency falls on. So if they're to tell us, or they're going to type in the chat and they're going to tell the other ghosts that I have, an emergency to go to, I
Mm-hmm.
need to leave the call and get off Discord completely to go and do something, perfectly fine. But saying that you have to leave the game and then leaving and then playing the next match isn't going to be accepted.
Right.
Unless, of course, you have the proof to show that you DC'd.
So just like brainstorming a little bit here, because the disconnects, while in theory and by the written rule, a very hard line is drawn. Where if you ever disconnect during the game, or if you AFK at the start of the game, in practice the community is very resistant to actually put up with that rule. And there's a lot of leniency, like you can see when the wording of the rule, it's not supposed to be a quote unquote group consensus,
Mm-hmm.
but in practice a lot of cancels get pushed through.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that there needs to be more innovation in this space still? Like, brainstorming live here. What if a DC happens, let's say, mid-game, and the game goes on, but the disconnected player also has some minus points to their MMR, but the game goes on? Because I think one of the things that people are most afraid of are the condemns leading to them getting ranked blocked. But what if
Mm-hmm.
the game continued, and instead of the whole game being resolved just as that person gets a DC, the auto results from the imposter server could take into account whenever someone disconnects. So you could even have multiple disconnects. And maybe that person loses 5 or 7 or whatever the requisite amount of MMR is, and the game goes on, right? Now,
We talking for dead people, or are we talking
for
for a
anyone,
live crew?
right, for
Anyone?
anyone. So suppose if a ghost DCs, maybe they only lose like 1 MMR if they only had 1 task left. But if they had all their tasks left, maybe they lose 8 MMR, right? Like, it could be factored
Mm-hmm.
in how much of a negative impact they're having for the imps, and then drain their
Um,
MMR accordingly, right? So if
then.
they're disconnecting when all their tasks are done, they don't actually have to lose any MMR.
Mm-hmm. See, for me, where that comes into a problem, a live crew, DCs from the game, right?
Yep.
What do we do at that point? Are we
Well,
supposed to let the game go on and then leave the crew at an even bigger disadvantage?
sure, and then punish that individual crew member. Because what happens today, in theory, is that that person is supposed to tank a DC. What happens in practice is that all their friends will just say, like, let's cancel the game. I don't think this person did that on purpose, right? With
In
some
practice,
exceptions,
if
where
that
if,
was to be reported, they would also gain an infraction.
of course, yeah, and then some people are like, oh, I don't want to get in trouble for pushing through a cancel, so I'm not going to do anything. So you've got this
Mm-hmm.
weird duality of some people want to push through the DC for fairness, some people want to push through a cancel to protect their friend, and then some people want to do nothing because they don't want to be sort of punished for doing the wrong thing. So you've got this very complex situation. If it was all handled by like the automated system, and that person just automatically lost MMR, right? Then you sort of know that you can play on. Because the worst part is just that the imps are going to be annoyed that their imp game got cancelled,
Mm-hmm.
and the crew are going to be annoyed that they're playing at a disadvantage,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, if we establish the culture that it's okay that people will disconnect from time to time and the game can continue and it's going to be imp favored, sure, but that crewmate that disconnected will get, whatever, minus MMR, and maybe the condemn, but the game can play on. It'd be interesting to see how it plays out. I don't think it would encourage people to disconnect on purpose, because the only motivation that's been brought up for that so far is to get a game cancelled, right? Like, they think they're going to
Mm.
lose, so maybe they'll orchestrate or fabricate a disconnect scenario so that the game will be
Yeah,
cancelled, right?
yeah, I can get that as well. It's kind of what the kind of way that it is, right? It it focuses mainly around the way that we have our DC is that um if the player is getting voted in the DC, the game continues.
Yep.
If the and then if they're dead, the game will continue. The major difficulty I would have with making it so that the game would continue and then the imposter server kind of takes it away from them is then as well we have to take into account what's going to happen for the regular games because we also have that whole side of the community,
Right.
which isn't really being taken into consideration here.
Sure, and I mean this
Um,
is just like a brainstorm. It's not like I've
yeah,
really thought this through. By the way,
no, I'm aware.
Abdu pointed out that they did do this in Polaris, and apparently it worked well. So it could be worth chatting with some like Polaris old guards and see how they handle it without the imposter
Mhm.
server.
I think what my question would be then to Abdu then in Polaris, what way did they go about dealing with the altering situations, and what kind of way was that rule written out to work practically?
Yeah.
Because was that not to fall upon the imp's decision also?
Yeah, so I think that that's probably going to have to be like an offline conversation. Abdu is
Agreed.
asking to be like dragged into the call. I don't know if we really want to
I think we just
tunnel
leave
too
that to
much
be
on this
behind the
issue.
scenes. Yeah,
Yeah, I don't really want to rat hole on this particular issue. I think it's a good discussion. It could be
definitely.
really fun to drill into that. I think we need more time to really think through the implications. There could
And
also be a
actually
world in
brainstorm.
which the rules are different for imposter server versus regular, just like we've had to do for pre-planning.
Yeah,
Anyway,
definitely.
I
And
think
I
we can
think that
move
could
on.
be.
Like
Hmm.
disconnects are just one of many issues that you have to deal with
Yeah,
on the staff side. So maybe you can tell me like, what's the one that keeps you up at night? Which one are you most worried about?
logging.
Clogging. Yeah, I've seen you've made that a senior staff
Yeah,
issue. Maybe you can tell me more about that.
logging is one of the most controversial decision-making processes at this very moment. The consistency in moderation of clogging has been undesirable throughout because realistically, it comes up to the discretion of the player. Some people will say that something isn't really clogging, and somebody will say that it is, and it always focuses upon this big argument. What we
Mm-hmm.
do try to strive for now is we have made it into a rank senior mod decision because it is the rank senior mod plus that decide what the policies on each different rule for cancels are. We discuss, we agree, and we make compromises on specific decisions. So, with clogging specifically, the big thing that I noticed was whenever imposters were genuinely trying to give information, and the crew were the people who were clogging over them, uh, that could result in a cancel
Right.
whenever we didn't have it defined as distinctly as what we do now. Um, it's been an issue where a lot of games I've had to overrule on the clogging basis because a lot of it does get brought up to me
Yep.
eventually, and my big role is the feedback, and then also being brought into VCs to, scrutinize, watch over mod decisions, possibly overrule them, uh, and that kind of is how it works. Clogging, right now, the way that we have defined it is they have to use up over half a meeting whilst other people are attempting to speak.
That's like
So,
way too lenient in my eyes.
and then on top of that, then, if they're going to be interrupting the crew, the only situation in which you can interrupt the crew would be as if you're interrupting with actual information. Saying things like, stop clogging, he's clogging his imp, that sort of thing, I'm not going to accept. Because, for one, that falls under out of game metagaming. Because they know from an outside of game perspective that uh, imps clogging results in a cancel,
Right. So
right?
what do
So
you
they're
think is the
using
bigger
that to
problem?
their
Is it
advantage.
imps clogging or crew clogging?
True,
Crew
by
clogging.
far.
That's very interesting.
Yes.
This came up, for full disclosure, I did my moderator interview yesterday, and the question was posed, what would I do in a clogging scenario? And
Hmm.
I had brought up my perspective, which is when imps clog, it can lead to a game being cancelled. Whereas if crew clog, it's kind of just a crew disadvantage. But I could see scenarios in which it makes it harder for the imps to clear themselves if the crew
Hmm.
clog too much.
So the current way that it works based on our cancellation process
Mm-hmm.
is if crew clog and put the imposters at a disadvantage,
Mm-hmm.
that can result in a cancel.
Yeah, but maybe it should even be intent throwing, right? Because like in theory,
Well, not.
well, I
It
don't
could
know
be
if it's
argued, but if
I
they
don't know
have
if it's intent throwing
information,
because like
yeah.
generally like the crew are incentivized to have a successful, well-run meeting, whereas the
Hmm.
imposters kind of want the chaos. So if the crew are clogging,
Exactly.
they can end up, derailing the meeting and leading even to a crew getting voted, right? Or just like not
Exactly.
very efficient transmission of information. So it is kind of
Exactly.
throwing by the crew. And
In
you
a
could just
way,
say
but
that's suboptimal play and like maybe they deserve the loss, right? It could be an imp win.
yeah. Hmm. I think I agree with that, and that's why whenever crew clog over crew, it's not a cancel.
Yeah,
The
that
same way, like if an imp was to clog over an imp and
exactly.
get them voted off, it's not going to be a cancel.
Right, right.
It's
That's
the
that's my
reverse
perspective as
roles that
well.
we
Yeah,
take into
now
account.
if crew are cloggy and it leads to a cancel, I think that's a miscarriage of justice. Unless like it turned it from a like imp favored to an imp unfavored situation. If the imps couldn't
That's the specific way it works.
right,
Yes.
if the imps couldn't get out their piece, then it's not a fair meeting, and too much clogging on mic is annoying no matter what. We don't really want to encourage
Hmm.
that generally.
Hmm.
Okay, so
I
then,
agree.
like, you've noticed a lot of inconsistency in moderator decisions. What sort of inconsistencies come up most frequently?
Situations in which that the imposters have slightly clogged, and it has resulted in a cancel. For example, like the imposters will be given out information, right? And they'll give it out for maybe 15 seconds too long. And a crewmate will be trying to speak, but they continue to speak and give their info. And a little bit of extra speaking, nonsense happens, and then it gets cancelled for that. There's situations in which at the very end of meetings, whenever it is the most jumbled up, that there's
Yeah.
been situations in which imposters have clogged in the last 15 seconds of the meeting saying who to vote, and it's got cancelled on the basis of that.
Now, what do you think should
Um,
happen if the imps are screaming in the final critical moments of the meeting?
Screaming,
Well, you know what I mean.
screaming,
Like,
insta cancel, like absolutely.
okay, well, to
Um,
use a less dramatic word, suppose that like the crew hasn't arranged their ducks in a row and they don't know who they're voting, and then for the last 10 seconds of the meeting, the imps are like, vote Abdu, vote Abdu, vote Abdu, and Abdu's a crew, and
I
Abdu
would
gets
put that
voted.
there is an imp. I put that there is an imp win. If the
Really?
crew
Okay.
gets the 10 seconds left in the game and they have no idea who they're voting,
Then it's on
I
them.
just think that's on them, in my
Okay.
opinion.
So in your mind, is it that the 50% of the meeting is a fair assessment of what is really clogging?
I think it's 50% of the meeting, but there has to be other people trying to speak.
Okay.
If the crew are allowing the imposter to speak and giving them that opportunity of time, then that's absolutely fair.
So in a 135-second meeting, in your eyes, it's fine as soon as the clock reads like 60 for the imps to just make noise for the rest of the meeting because it's technically less than 50%.
Only in the scenario where other people aren't trying to speak.
Oh, okay. So as soon as someone else is trying to speak, it's unacceptable.
Yes. So
Okay.
it's whenever people are trying to speak and they're not, at one point, they're not going to actually be given any info and they're just going to be recycling info. We can evaluate that.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
the baseline is 50%, but say you get to 40 seconds in the meeting, right? And for
Yep.
40 seconds, no crew gets to actually give any more than a single
And they're
sentence.
trying to
And then
speak, and then they. Okay, what if they're silent, and then after the fact they claim that they didn't get to talk? Because I see that all the time.
that's their fault. They need to try.
Okay, so if
I
they're
can't
speaking
agree
up
in
and
a
they keep getting cut off, then it's a clogging, yeah?
yes, exactly. I
Cool.
can't agree that them sitting in silence and allowing that to happen
Yeah,
is fair.
I agree. I think that that's like sort of revisionist history saying that they were trying to speak and then they really weren't. Yeah.
I think you're asking for every imp game to get cancelled if
And there,
we
that
moderate
is,
on that
this
basis.
is such a problem in my eyes, and it's the same thing you brought up earlier. Like it's a very crew favored meta at the moment, and it's not
Mhm.
just the rules; it's also the moderation, right? It's very
Exactly.
often a crew win or a cancel. It's
Exactly.
very rare that we push through an imp win.
And I think that I've been reevaluating a lot of things and I put some very whenever you are in this position and you have this crew favored meta, you have to put some very crazy like questions into consideration like should we change it so that clogging can never result in a cancel?
Right.
Should we make it so that it's just triple as harsh on a punishment? and then just see what that goes like. Um,
I
could
think
we push intentional trolling back into a position where it no longer results in a cancel?
there's a lot of these things that come down to enforcing the decisions in the moderation and so on. I think there may
Hmm.
also be a broader cultural change needed where people don't view an imp win as a crew loss or a crew throw, right? Like
Hmm.
it's usually the motivation in my eyes that people will favor towards crew win because that's the popular decision, right? Like
Yeah.
the moderator doesn't want to catch a bunch of hate for pushing through an imp win, because it's going to lead to a lot of screaming and yelling and like chaos
Yeah.
and annoyance and maybe their friends in the game, like all sorts of like perverse
All different
incentives to get
factors. Yes.
this crew win. When in reality, like the point of Among Us is to play imposter well, in my eyes, right? And the crew are
Hmm.
trying to catch the imposter, but the imposters are supposed to be sneaky, and like there is going to be a little bit of chaos, and then when they do it well and trick the crew, that should be celebrated. They sort of
I agree.
they beat the social deduction game,
Yeah,
and
I think that there is a very negative outlook on imposter wins.
yeah, and
I
you
think that they use the rules as
right,
a scapegoat a
yeah,
lot.
yep,
And I
and
think,
it's
you
it's very
know,
rare that people will be like, oh, that was a well-deserved imp win. There's a lot of
hmm.
focus on, oh, the crew just threw, that was a shit imp game, those people didn't play well, or so much negativity when we
Hmm.
could be pointing out the things that the imps did well. If
Exactly. And that's like what I don't really get the opportunity to play because I'm very busy all the time.
right,
I have a lot of things going on all the time. Um, Whenever I can play, I will jump in and play, and that is kind of the type of way that I try and make it because specifically in my lobbies, what people don't know is that um, Bill decided he was going to make a lovely rule in the ranked, the way the ranked moderators can't, moderate their own games.
yeah.
Ranked admins can. That was the decision made by Bill, and it gets blamed on me all the time. But whenever I'm in my games, I think the biggest issue that I have is that I'm constantly watching out for people to break rules. Um, and sometimes it can kind of cause issues for me as well. Like I may miss out on info because I'm watching out what people are gonna say.
Right, you're trying to
The
moderate at the
the
same time.
culture in the server is very trying to get around the rules whenever the rules are so easy to follow.
Yep.
They're very black and white.
Right, and then
Um,
you get things like I have a special task type of
exactly, and it's all these stupid things that I shouldn't even need to make announcements for.
right, right,
And I make a lot of announcements as well
right.
that are to gauge opinions. Like I put out an announcement like, what would you like to see get
Yep,
changed? Like,
yep,
would you like to see queuing get removed? Would you like to see this happening?
yep.
But instead of them giving genuine feedback, it was, why is there not a neither option? Like, it was a lot of complaining for no reason whenever it was really obvious that it was me trying to gauge opinions by the way that I wrote it.
Right.
It wasn't, what should I change? It was, what would you like to see change?
Yep, yep.
They have to also know that I'm not going to be able to read, Among Us ranked at all the 500 to 2,000 messages per day
Sure.
that get put in there.
On that
Um,
specific one, where like people want a neither option, I think that there is missing signal maybe from the way that that announcement was done. Because if you propose like three rule changes, like vision, clogging, and queuing, and then all you see is the positive reception for those things, you're not going to see like the controversy side of it. Like if
mhm.
15 people say they want to remove queuing, but actually if there were an option and 80 people said keep queuing, you
Yeah,
would get a more complete picture. I think
but I
maybe
think I think that's what feedback is for, though. I think
sure.
that's the big thing that feedback is for is you see an announcement and you just go in there and you say, "Well, you've put this, but I would actually rather see neither."
Yeah,
Because I'll actually read that because feedback is the big place that I will read, respond, and discuss.
correct. And I did leave that in feedback as well.
Yeah,
For
and I think the vision question is a great one, and I
right.
think it's definitely something that is in consideration.
Yep.
It's very big meta change if
Absolutely.
you do that.
Yep.
I think that if we were going to push that change through, it would have to be next season because I don't think
Oh,
it would
absolutely.
be
I don't think
fair
we would
on a
just like
results basis
suddenly
to do it
change
mid.
the mid-season
Yeah,
would be a bit risky. I do
that's
also
what we
think
try and do.
right. I do also think we should be paying attention to when like the O2 bugs get fixed because having a
We are paying very close attention
good
to that. We want to be able to push
yeah
them maps in.
yeah
Um, um, I think the big thing is that a lot of people in feedback are kind of recycling the same points that have been there for months.
right
And Ian is very busy. He's involved with a business merger,
yeah. I've
and
followed
is
along with
dealing
some
with a
of that.
lot of projects right
Right.
now.
So I think
So
that
the
this has
issue that
been.
I'm having
Sorry, go ahead.
The issue that I'm having is I'm asking for all these changes and I'm pushing really hard to get Aizen to push these. I like the best change that I've actually got is to fix the issues with the MMR system.
Yep.
And we made a big push to make voting more important in the MMR system
Yep.
because we thought that if you're voting in a critical situation, you should be rewarded more for voting correctly and penalized more for voting incorrectly because it feels unfair for these people to be gaining the same MMR whenever they are potentially throwing the game.
Absolutely. I mean, like, I've been in that situation too, where a crewmate voted another crewmate on a critical vote, and everyone correctly points out that that throw is so impactful, and
Yeah.
really needs to have a lot of MMR sort of weighted in, factored in. On
Mm.
specifically Asians' availability, that's been a problem for 2 years.
Yeah, it
My
has. Yeah,
feedback,
it's been.
yeah, my feedback for him consistently has been he needs to remove the single point of failure, which is himself, but he's kind of resistant to do so. I think lately he's been coming around to the idea of giving you, Ox, access to the source code in
Yeah.
the backend and the
Mhm.
AWS instances and all that sort of stuff.
Yes.
Because there are cases, for example, where, you know, the imposter server is glitchy and it needs a reboot, and so someone
Hmm.
needs to be able to hit reboot, but Asian's asleep,
Exactly.
and he's the only one that
Hmm.
can.
And
So
I'm usually the most available.
right, and
So
that situation kind of sucks. So I really want to
yeah.
see us like reduce the single point of failure there. Also, what happens if Asian goes on holiday or like quits the scene?
We're done for. You know what I
Yeah, the
mean?
whole thing just
It's
falls over. We have a big bus problem. The bus problem, for anyone unfamiliar, is what happens if one person gets hit by a bus? If this specific person goes away, if everything comes tumbling down like a house of cards, you have a bus problem. And right now, Asian is our bus problem. So, like,
and
yeah,
he's been our bus problem for
for
7 to
forever.
8 months. You
Exactly.
know what I
For as
mean?
long
In
as the
this
imposter
server.
server thing has existed, he has been a consistent bus problem and kind of reluctant to unbus problem himself.
Yeah. But I also think that, you would be resistant to give, another person your code. Because
Sure,
it's his baby, and I understand that kind of perspective.
I get that, but I think
I would
there's
love to
ways.
have another person learn his code.
Right, there are ways
Um,
to sort of have control without having to be the only person that can do DevOps. Like, he
yeah.
can add a button that lets you just reboot the server. That way you don't have to have
Hmm.
source code access. But it's not
Yeah.
really ever a priority for him. Um,
But I definitely need source code access to be able to
I
change
would
the
love,
rules, etc.
I would love for you to have source code access, or even
Yeah.
like lots of people to have source code access. But he's a little bit resistant to that. I think that's a
He's
shame.
very resistant.
Yeah.
And I'll push for that because I need to be able to reset seasons. I need to be
Yeah.
able to, you know,
So many
put through
things.
new
The
rules. And I
tournament
mean, we
almost
haven't had,
didn't happen because of his availability. I got a
yeah.
little bit flustered about the whole situation. Um, but yeah.
Surprisingly, I was very calm, because I expected it.
Yeah,
I
I
was
mean,
very
I expected
prepared.
it as well. It's just
I was
disappointing.
very, very prepared to
I
go into
wasn't
Emmanuel's
surprised.
system.
I was just deeply disappointed, and I'm glad that
Yeah,
he stepped up to the plate and sort of turned it around.
he
But
definitely did.
again, it's like heroism when really we could just have a dedicated team. There's enough
Mhm.
people that are donating a lot of their lives basically here,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
you know, it's just code at the end of the day. And if he really feels attached to it as a personal project, totally makes sense. What if we can fork it? That
Hmm.
way his copy will
Yeah,
always live on as an eternal
true.
thing, and we can just have a fork. Or if we have to
Just
start from scratch, so be it.
yeah, the issue is finding people that would be willing to start from scratch.
Sure.
Not
I
a lot
mean,
of people are interested in investing time into this,
if it
into the
really
type of
came to
bots that you
that,
have to
I
build.
could try myself, I am a software engineer by trade. I've done 11 years in industry of software engineering. I could probably do it. The time is a factor, of course. You know, I've got a baby on the way.
Of course.
We have a few other sort of like people who know how to code floating around the Among Us community. There is
Hmm.
also an ability to just hire contractors to
True.
like write code, and then you keep ownership yourself.
Yeah,
There are
definitely.
ways. It would be an
There's a lot of
enormous,
options.
enormous freaking hassle when we could just ask nicely, and maybe he will sort of bend.
He will. He'll bend, and I'll get access eventually. But I'm not too worried because I'll have it by the end of the season,
Hmm.
as a near guarantee. I'm
That's
pretty
good.
sure.
Yeah.
Um, I think what I'm more interested in would be eventually getting around to the part that I would have somebody learn his coding. We have a lot of things that need to, happen.
Yeah.
We have had three huge changes that have been pending for 3 months
Yeah.
because of just the inability to get around to doing it.
Like
Um,
even
I've
little
been
quality of
waiting.
life things like the freaking
The
mute
pause
bug.
system, like the mute bug, the pause system for imposter server.
Yeah.
We've seen that there is a pause system that can be implemented from the tournament as well.
Yep.
Um,
When you
there
say the
is.
pause system, are you talking about like um, resubmitting a result that someone has accidentally
Yes,
cancelled? Yeah, that's so
yes.
annoying.
That needs to really badly be done
Yes, because
because
otherwise it's
it
like the
is.
MMR distribution is completely
Yeah,
scuffed because someone hit the red button.
it's such a morale issue as
Yeah.
well,
Yes.
uh, which has to really be noted.
This
People work
could have been
hard in
fixed
these
a long
games,
time ago. It's not particularly difficult.
been being pushed for from
2 years.
I got anywhere near the scene, been being pushed. I've been basically running the show from October,
Yeah.
and we've had to push a lot of change, and we've had to rework entire systems, on all basis, on moderation basis, on the way that we handle our moderators, on the way that we hire our moderators. The whole system had to be completely and utterly reworked because it originally started off with a system in which we evaluated their character, and that's as far as we went. Uh, and the realness is that I came in on the back end of MMR,
Mhm.
in which I was very active in there, and I played a role in the staff team over there. Very,
That's cool.
very, a very, very different environment than here, and it was a big, change. Uh, MMR had little to zero rules, just in
Yeah, I
general. It
noticed
was
that. It was
it
like you
was
can
mainly
openly
about playing.
metagame. You could do whatever
Yes,
you want basically with
you could
some
do whatever you wanted to. Yeah,
minimal exceptions, you know.
but
No
the
DMing or like whatever.
yeah, the
Yeah.
big thing that you would notice in them games is that you give people this opportunity to abuse the rules,
Yeah.
but nobody did.
Right.
Like,
A lot of trust
w-
involved. But
there's
there was
there was
also a
just
very like high bar to even getting into the server.
it was yes, it was extremely high bar. Like, there was, the tolerance to toxicity was definitely there,
Yeah.
um, but there was no tolerance to the very 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 high tier stuff.
So
Um,
Storm
very
just
high
wanted to
tier
point out that
toxicity.
you were the best mod. He said
Oh,
you only won
amazing.
him 10 times.
Only 10 times? Oh, that's amazing.
Cool.
Um,
Yes, I mean, like, having seen the MMR server from the inside, what are some of the pros and cons of that server versus the purple sort of mixing pot of all the servers coming together?
loopholing didn't
Hmm.
happen. You know, we had a very, very harsh system on playing to the best of your ability.
Hmm.
It's very, very defined. You have in and around 10 rules with in and around 6 to 7 points per, so it was very detailed.
Hmm.
We were very concise in the way that we kind of did it. And there was realistically a no tolerance on DCing because you couldn't DC whilst you were dead. You could not DC whilst you were alive.
Hmm.
The game would just end automatically with the bot itself. It would just end and take away MMR and give people MMR. That's just the way it worked.
Yep, so those are some of the
Um,
pros. What are some of the cons?
the cons of that system. is burnout is very, very likely. The burnout that came from that server in comparison to purple is drastic because our seasons would have been 3 to 4 months.
Hmm.
Um, you're talking very, very long seasons.
Yep.
Um, I think the MMR system there was better,
Mm.
100%,
Hmm.
because it was a rating system that completely evaluated everything that you did.
Right.
You know, and that's a big thing that I've tried to bring here is what we actually reward people for.
Right.
So if you report a body on 5 and you save the game with 2 imposters, you get an MMR increase now. That was a big thing that we had to get changed. If you report a body on 3 whenever the killer's cooldown is on 5 seconds or less, you now will get a big increase because you've just saved the game, right? So I felt like they were needed because we are in a situation where it's so voter heavy,
Uh huh.
that we needed external things to affect the whole situation, which was huge in my opinion.
What
Um,
What about the inclusiveness side of things? Like, it seems like purple has more diversity, like in terms of platform.
yeah,
You've got people playing on PS5.
definitely. MMR was PC only.
Yeah.
You could only access it via PC, so um, any mobile players were basically out of the window,
Hmm.
which was just unfortunate, but it just was never coded to the point that that would work. I think, we have really, really tried to be as inclusive as possible, and we really, really try to support, the mobile players and the different platform players, and there's a lot of limitations on me because I have players who want, Imp Server gone, and I have players who absolutely love Imp Server.
Right.
So it puts me into this extreme gray area where I kind of just have to put my foot down and say, no, we can't get rid of Imp Server because, you know, I waited 5 months to get it back.
Yep.
Why would I wait and push so hard for something to come back just to get spit in my face and told, no, that's not good enough because we can't play it. And
Well,
I've pushed really hard for the iOS and Android players to be able to play and
I
get
think
that
that
fixed.
there have been a lot of improvements on the imposter server. The fact that you can play on iOS now is huge. That used to be a giant inclusiveness issue.
Hmm.
I think it could
There's
continue.
definitely issues still with
Yeah,
iOS, definitely.
definitely. And I mean, it's still like a bit of a barrier to entry for new players, and it still has glitches and so on, but it does do a lot of positive as well. Like, the imposter
Yeah.
server is popular amongst the people who are used to it, because
Hmm.
it does a lot of fairness things, like penalizing you less if you die first, for
Yeah,
instance. Like,
exactly.
a lot of things like that that make it feel more balanced than just
Hmm.
straight up regular ranked. Um,
Yeah. I think in regular ranked you get rewarded for the reward. In imposter server you get rewarded for your performance,
right.
which I think is vital,
Yep.
um, for this game specifically because I don't think that I should, if I die first, begin in the same MMR as the person who voted correctly on 30.
Right.
I just think
Exactly.
that's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, like, the regular server gives you equality because everyone's treated the
Hmm.
same, whereas the imposter server gives you equity, where people are treated fairly, and it's more of a
We
meritocracy.
we from the second that I kind of moved into this kind of position of running ranked, as fluently as what I have been, me and Bill from the get-go have always wanted the aim of removing regular lobbies completely.
Interesting.
That's always been an interest. But to do that, we would have to make Imp server available to everybody.
Definitely, and more
Um,
reliable.
exactly. It would need to be much more stable, and it would need to be, to the point that we would not have many issues.
I think that a
Um,
critical piece of that is removing the single point of failure.
yeah,
If there's a
I mean,
development team, if there's
definitely.
a DevOps team, if it's got nines of uptime, like maybe three nines, and like you can mitigate when it's actually down with like a reliable set of people that can reboot it or whatever you need to do,
Exactly.
then we're talking. Then it
We
might be
have
possible to
a
have it
lot. We
consistently
have a
better.
lot of devs that I think would be interested that we already have on board
Yeah.
from the Purple moderation team.
Awesome.
Um, and I think a big thing that I want the community to take from this um, is that, you know, we as the staff are not here to punish or to push, you know, infractions against
Right.
you. That's not what we're trying to do, and that's not. Um, if you think that we get enjoyment off that, then that's just false.
Well,
It's
it's
a
not the aim.
mitigation strategy.
Right. It's not the aim. If you do end up with moderators that have that motivation, we've failed.
We have a big problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's never really been my goal. I don't enjoy it. I don't love it. I don't hate it.
Right.
It's it's the last ditch option. I will
So,
always try and mitigate and, you know, verbally warn before I push stuff. But
without
sometimes
getting
the lines,
too much into specific individuals, what
yeah,
do you see as general patterns for people being de-staffed?
de-staffed,
Yes, because there was a comment yesterday from someone who
inactivity.
wanted to. Oh yeah, inactivity is definitely a non-controversial
Mm,
one, right?
yeah, definitely.
There was a comment from a new to ranked but not new to Among Us individual in Hangout yesterday, who had applied for
Mhm,
moderator, wasn't successful because of not enough sort of experience with ranked,
mhm,
um, but has like 800 hours in the game or something like that. Um,
mhm,
and one of the comments was their impression of people who have the retired staff role. Now,
mhm,
that person indicated that a retired staff person should be acting at a certain level of candor, but often
mhm.
isn't. And
Yes.
both
Re-
that person and I had different views of what retired staff means. In their eyes, retired staff were once a peer of the community and probably retired in like good graces or whatever. In my eyes, when someone has retired staff, I usually think there's probably something up there. You know, like there's a reason they were
oh,
de-staffed.
the retired staff role. You could put that in quotations, the retired part.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
a lot, you know, it's a mixture. There's people that will step down, and there's people that will get demoted.
Yes.
Um,
Like this
and
dishonorably
there's certain people
discharged.
that will ask, you know, not to get the role, and then there's some people that are just indifferent to it.
Right.
Um, it's it's really, you know, if we go out on bad terms, we go out on bad terms. But it's just a way to recognize that at one point they were there trying to work on the server and to improve the server.
Right.
It's just a bit of gratification. And we do, you know, retired staff are expected, you know, to hold themselves to a higher,
Right.
you know, thing. Do they? No, but are they punished slightly harsher than other people on the back of that? Sometimes, maybe.
Right.
You know, it can happen because, you know, I'm not saying that that consistently happens, but there's some things that they just should not be doing that they might, you know, get punished a slightly, you know, harsher on.
Right.
Um,
Right.
I think, you know, I mean, I've went leaps and bounds, you know, for the community, and I think um I have went from probably one of the most hated uh, ranked moderators to quite possibly, you know, more of a medium opinion.
Right.
Because I get the backhand of everything. You know what I mean? If there's a
Yeah.
decision made, it falls back onto me.
Yep.
If there's an announcement made, I'm making it. You know, and you know everything will fall back to me.
Yep.
Um, the point we're not trying to make it so that, you know, the ranked players are censored or, you know, the ranked players aren't able to, you know, speak their mind. Which you'll notice in my interactions with people, you know, everywhere across the server. I try to make, you know, it as free as possible, and that was a big policy shift that we made just in general. Um, we made the policy shift to decrease the censorship of the community in general, and there is still, you know, discussions that happen, and the discussions and the final decisions on certain things are denied, um, not on the basis of me, but you also have to remember that I'm working with, you know, a senior mod plus team
Mm-hmm.
on a general basis, and then I'm also working with a ranked senior mod plus team as well. So I have to, you know, run two different staff teams, which sometimes can, work, not run. I help run one and then I run one, which I think some people forget because some people think that all my time and dedication goes to ranked.
Right.
Unfortunately, it doesn't. I don't. I have other responsibilities to focus on also, and that's why we built the Rank Senior Mod team for them to be specifically focused on the community and to allow me to, push the community into the right place.
If you think about like the breakdown of your time, where does it generally go? Like, what is taking the most time from you, and what do you wish was taking the most time?
The most time that I spend would be the staff teams, where we need to move for the staff teams,
Mm-hmm.
what differences do we need to make, like just general scrutiny I put a lot of time into.
Yep.
And that comes in ranked as well with, looking into game situations and evaluating mod decisions, overturning them,
Okay.
kind of really trying to bring in um,
Basically, internal affairs.
more, mostly internal affairs, yes,
Okay.
very much so. I would like to spend more time, actually in the community, spend time in the community, um, trying to, actually get the feedback that's not being placed correctly.
Right. So like running a
Um,
town hall or something like that.
definitely, and that will be an idea whenever I have more time on my hands.
Yep. So
Um,
how do you free up some of the time? How do you reduce the internal affairs burden?
um, I think it's just you reduce the internal affairs by, balancing out the team more and having more people working on it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because it'll give more hands on deck, and eventually will allow me to focus on my main points of areas to focus on.
Right. So
Um,
you're trying to
you,
hire new moderators, and then you hope
mhm,
to grow up enough moderators to handle the frontline duties, and then promote enough
exactly.
people to senior to sort of handle the internal affairs part.
Hmm.
By the way, are
With the
senior
hope
mods
of
today?
eventually,
Are the senior mods today doing a lot of the internal affairs work, or are you still finding
yes,
yourself doing
ranked
a lot of heavy
wise,
lifting?
yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes, server side, I would be doing more internal affairs.
Yeah. Why is
Um,
it so hard to staff senior server mods? Like, what's going on there?
um, it's not hard. It's just we're pushing our staff constantly to improve.
Okay.
We have to allow them to learn and to focus, and we've kind of pushed them into a direction now that all of our moderators are now trained to deal with ranked players. That was a new requirement that
Cool.
got brought in, and it's kind of we're building them up to get there.
Okay.
Um, Getting senior mods, I think a lot of people don't realize like the jump between moderator and senior moderator is very big. So we have to really push people to their max, and then eventually they'll get brought up. Sometimes it takes a wee bit longer just to make sure that we are, but there will eventually be people being brought up. We have quite a bulky senior mod team already, so it's just building on it a little bit, so
Okay.
then we can have more hands on deck across all the time zones. It's like because we don't really have an issue. It's more so my rank senior moderator team. We would need maybe one or two more people,
Okay. So
to push in
that's
that
the main
direction.
gap at the moment. You feel if you had one or
Yes.
two more ranked senior mods, then you would have enough free time to go do like a town hall once a month or
Yeah.
something.
But I
Okay.
think I think also my IRL is very, very, time taking right now.
Yep.
I got exams, end of this month.
That's true. You did mention that.
And they're my finals. Um, I'm changing over jobs
Yep.
as well, because I just got a new job
Yeah.
in my workplace, so that's a whole switch of
Congratulations.
hours.
And by the
Thank you
way,
very much.
happy birthday. Happy belated
Thank
birthday.
you. Yes. Yes. I turned 18 yesterday, so I have been off
You are only
school a lot.
18? Ox,
Yeah.
my guy, you are
Yeah.
crushing it.
Yeah. A lot
Awesome.
of people have no clue what age I am. But
You know what's
yes.
so funny by contrast? There's someone who's 19 and says, I'm only 19, and You're 18
it,
and doing
yeah,
so much more.
there's a lot of things that I'm dealing with. So this month, I'm focusing a lot on the IRL, and I'm kind of going to let my rank senior mods, advise me as they do,
Yeah.
and kind of work more behind the scenes this month, and then with the hope in the summer to push, very hard to then, June and July to kind of improve the space overall and kind of make, you know, I'll make the small changes for next season and we'll do our tests as we do every season. Um, I'm hoping to get access to this code so I can make mid-season changes, because there are some that I want to make to shift the meta mid-season.
So, Ox, just
Um,
out of curiosity, do you put any of this stuff on your resume in real life?
no,
And why not?
I don't. Um, I mean, not I could, but I mean, I'm not at the point that I really need to have an insane resume,
Sure, I
because
mean,
I'm
but
just doing, the basic jobs, but eventually probably will, yeah.
right. I mean, I
It'll,
think that like at the bottom of your resume, you might want to call out your community contributions, where you don't just
mhm,
like operate as a member of the community. You're a leader, right? Like
mhm,
you have experience with hiring, with firing, with promotion, with performance evaluation, with mediating conflicts, with
mhm,
like resolving a lot of complex and tricky issues, and it has helped you grow a ton. Like people in
mhm,
the chat, like look over the Twitch chat after this interview. I think you'll be um, humbled by like how much growth is apparent even just from that, because you
yeah.
used to be quote unquote a hated mod,
It
as
was
you
very
yourself
hated.
said. Yeah, and now
Yeah.
you've matured beyond that to the point where
Hmm.
people see you as a quote unquote chill mod, which is
Well, yeah.
quite an impressive amount of growth, and you've had a
Hmm.
meteoric rise in terms of your amount of sort of trusted responsibility in the community.
Hmm.
And yeah, this
I
is no
think,
small achievement. Like you should be really proud.
mhm. I think the thing that what people, kind of the way that I look at it is I came into a very, very messy situation originally.
Mm-hmm.
I was in the first set of rank mods that ever came through.
Yep.
Um, so it was very messy from the start. And with working with the owners, the admins, the senior mods, Bill, everybody has been very vital in improving the situation in ranked. It was a very, very toxic place to walk into. And I think we have grown leaps and bounds into the way that we handle things. Are they perfect? Absolutely not. And I would never be the person who will lie and say that everything is perfect and nothing's, going wrong at points, because that's just natural and that's how we learn.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the community at this point have a lot more, time to give to the mods, and they give the mods a lot more time. And, I've moved into a position where I'm more held back because my decision making process is very, very black and white.
Right.
Um, I build the rules, so it's much easier for me to know what the decision is very quickly, whereas moderators are learning the rules that I've composed.
Right.
So it it definitely has like an impact. The reason that I was probably most hated was because I was kind of the first person that would, not really hold back, and I would just, report everything. You know, there was a lot of I would,
You were
I
zealous.
I was a snitch. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I was a snitch by heart. And
Right.
I think the reason that I was hated is because I went from this very chill community in MMR, where,
Mm-hmm.
we kind of pushed all of MMR into purple. So we did, me and Bill. And he pushed, the AER people and the Nutters people, towards this community.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think, I came in and I was a snitch and nobody likes snitches. So that's kind of why I was originally hated. And nobody had really ever experienced the level of scrutiny that I would give towards the players.
Right.
So it was a big shift. And I think what people are starting to realize now is that, I haven't really changed a whole lot, and I've kind of just learnt from prior mistakes and kind of, fixed up on certain issues that I would experience and some personal things that I needed to do to be able to push myself to improve.
Yeah.
With the help of, of course, all the different higher ups that have pushed, me to become to where I am now.
That's really
Um,
impressive, like level of self-awareness and introspection and growth mindset there.
hmm Well, you're not going to get anywhere without, scrutinizing yourself. If I'm here and I'm here to scrutinize, loads of people, I should also be looking at myself and seeing what can I do better.
You're starting with the man in the
Um,
mirror.
exactly. Um, but I mean, I think there's a lot of growth to be made, and I think there's a lot of growth that's been had.
Hmm.
Um, and we're going to continue to work to grow the community as we have been. Our activity has been pushed very, very, forward, and we have really improved. The tournament was great, and thank you for bringing that to us with such a great model
Yeah.
that we were able to just go into and just pick apart and fix everything. And there's a lot of big things that are going to be happening in the future as well that we will also be working on.
I'm so excited for that. I think that like that's kicked us off in a really positive growth direction. I see a lot of people resurfacing back to ranked from the
Hmm
grave. I also see a lot of
Yeah.
new blood, like a lot of people who are trying out ranked. I'm also like really impressed that people are embracing the welcoming attitude of not yelling at new people and
hmm
giving them a chance. There's still a little bit of that. I will say that there are some new players who have opened up and said that they feel that the community is quite hostile, and
hmm
yells a little bit
I agree.
at them.
Yeah, I
And that would
agree.
be nice to
There's
reduce that.
brutality.
Like we should
Yeah.
really be kind to people who are new, give them a little bit of grace, a little bit of leniency, let them have that chance to learn. For the people who've been around for 2 years, if they're still throwing games and they should know better, we can be a little bit harsher. That's fine. It doesn't have to get to the
Mhm.
level of like F slur, R slur type of stuff, but
You
like
know,
holding people
yeah,
accountable for like playing the game seriously, I think matters. But yeah, definitely for
definitely.
new people, like be nice, please. We want them to come back, not be driven away.
I think I think we definitely, have some things that we need to focus on, and I think there's a lot of things that I'm interested in having discussions with players about. We are starting to come around a wee bit more to a coaching system,
Hmm.
which could be put into place. But that will kind of have to go through a lot of, inner discussions to see what we can actually do to make that happen. Um, there's a lot of things like, links for YouTube and stuff like that, which aren't able to be put in
Yeah.
to the server, and
Yep.
there's kind of these things that kind of would be a holdback for a
Yeah,
coaching
I've heard a
system.
lot of people who would be interested in doing the coaching stuff. I know there's been a bit of resistance to having an official thing. I would love to like kick off a grassroots thing and see how people respond to
Mm.
it. Because
I
already
think
we've had a
the
few sort of like people interested in reviewing VODs and like having a panel discussion and being open to the growth. I will have to like wrap things because my daughter just woke up. I can see her sort
absolutely
of stirring
fine.
on the monitor.
Yeah.
Do you want to give any sort of like closing thoughts, Ox? Maybe any shout outs or any like last words?
Um, I think the biggest thing that I want people to take from this is that we are paying attention and we are trying to make the changes, but you need to understand that changes take time and we
Hmm.
can't just make them in a 24-hour period. There's
Hmm.
a lot more to the process than what you see. So please try to be patient with us, and we are going to push to improve the community and make the changes that maybe everybody won't agree with, but will have a positive impact on the community as a whole.
Fantastic. So have heart, everyone. Have patience, and yeah, embrace that it can be even better than where it is now. Thank you so much for your time today, Ox. For everyone
No
watching the
worries.
stream, we're going to raid Cow, a new ranked player who has also done
Ooh,
an interview earlier. Thank you, Aspect, for redeeming Guide the Raid, and for Strangers for finding Cow's handle. Or maybe it was Misbehaving. I'm actually not completely familiar who sent me the link. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and start the raid. And yeah, thanks again for your time, Ox. Take care
No
and see
worries
you
at
around.
all. Thank
Happy
you for
birthday
having
again.
me. Thank you.
Alright, take care.
I'll see you later.
Bye. Okay, I think we are ready to raid.
She did a shitty little fake walk, and then when Carrie started scanning, she walked off.
I'm skipping.
Oh, but she's CEO by the way, the game ended.
Hey yo, Breakneck, thanks for the raid. What the fuck? That's awesome, thanks. We're just playing some ranked and we're having a lobby-ish. Even though people are kinda trolling-ish. Thank you, dude. Thank you so much. Hello everybody to the stream, hello to strangers. Hello Misbehavin'. We're just casually playing ranked. Just interviewed Ox. Check out the VOD whenever. Oh, you've interviewed Ox? Oh shit.